Regulars as they come in. Dennis Heisey, El Paso County.
Mark Snyder, Mayor of Manitou Springs.
Rob McDonald, PPACG.
Darrell Blaine, El Paso County.
Mark Caverty, Mayor, John Reno.
Mark Twalaby, Park County. And if I leave early, don't be surprised.
They're not going to close that road till late this afternoon. After.
It's not going to rain today.
Just a
Jill
little
Gabler,
nervous.
City Council.
Jim Mull, Public Transportation Representative.
Jim Moore, Military Affairs.
Dave Turley, City of Woodland Park.
Norm Steen, Telecounty.
Tyler Stevens, Green Mountain Falls. Annie Pico, City Council, Colorado Springs.
We'll
Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC.
Morning.
Stuart Kane, City of Colorado Springs. Scott Hartman, PPACG.
Tina Burkett, PPACG. Jeannie Dennis, PPACG. Pat Ellis, Silverton.
Neil Ralston, Colorado Springs Airport.
Cheryl Dingwell Kekritz, Area Agency on Aging.
Ray Krieger, civilian.
That's a good job. Wendy Pettit, CDOT Region 2.
Michael Snow, CDOT Transportation Development.
Did we catch everybody in the audience? Yeah, I just want to make sure I've got the audience first. I was losing track. Okay, Craig.
Craig Casper, Transportation Director.
Beverly Mayeski, Financial Manager. Jackie Hewitt, PPACG.
And back to Councilmember Miller.
Joel Miller, Colorado Springs City Council.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. We have a staff recognition. Tina? Sure. We need to get her up here so we know who we're talking about. Rob?
Thanks. Hi, Tina.
Hi, Rob.
Tina introduced herself with I'll call it a slate of ombudsmen, and you'll hear a presentation about all the things they do. But this morning we want to recognize Tina for 5 years of service, which I find hard to believe. Seems like you just got here. But knowing all the stories that she's told, she has 5 years worth of stories as an ombudsman. Some she could probably tell, others maybe not. But it's been a pleasure so far over the 5 years. Tina has really done well in dealing with all the residents and facilities that she oversees. And so we have a plaque and a binder to recognize the 5 years of service here at PPACG. So thank you, Tina.
Well, thank you.
Anything you'd like to add, Tina?
I've just enjoyed my 5 years. It went by really fast.
You get the work part. I get the fun part.
You want to do the fun first? Let's do the fun first.
Thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your time here. Taking care of our seniors, which we're getting there quickly. Even young people like you, you're getting there 5 years closer than when you.
Tina, thank you. And
Thank you.
now a new binder so you can fill it up with more stories.
Okay, thanks.
But you'll have to ask her personally for that.
Public comment. Items not on the agenda. Anyone in the audience have an item they'd like to bring before this board that is not on today's agenda? Yes.
I know I'm not a member of the audience, but I did have a question, and since it's not on the agenda, I was hoping maybe Tom or Wendy or somebody could update us on Highway 24 and CDOT's efforts to do some flood mitigation up there. I've been reading a lot in the paper, and I thought maybe we could get a straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, update on what the plans are.
This would be a great time. We've been joined by Tom Rona from CDOT. So, Tom?
Good morning.
You were up here, I understand, had an eyes on and promptly closed the road. Is that the way that worked?
Well, not exactly.
everyone here is aware of the large event that we had back on Friday. And we've got a mitigation project underway at this point. We're to the point where the measures that we've undertaken or in the midst of undertaking, for the most part, are expected to improve the situation, but it doesn't appear that it's enough. I mean, many of you have seen the damage to the connecting road, the US 24 business route, where it ties into our main 24, US 24 highway, just south of the Rainbow Falls Bridge that spans the Fountain Creek. We had some very intense rainfall and floodwaters there, brought down quite a bit of debris that actually turned the Rainbow Bridge into an aqueduct, and consequently the roadway couldn't handle that flow and that added debris, and we've got considerable road damage where we lost a good portion of that roadway, and we'll be looking to our Transportation Commission and requesting additional funding for emergency repairs to that roadway. So I'll be asking for some funding this week at the commission meetings, and we've scoped the damage and have come up with some a game plan on how to tackle that area. Just really had much more rainfall than we could have imagined. It came down very, very quickly out of the Waldo Canyon drainage area that caused that severe problem. And what we'll be looking at, more than likely upsizing the culvert to handle the higher flows, but I'm not sure if that's going to be enough for events of that magnitude or greater. There'll likely need to be some work upstream, and I know that the county and others have been involved with implementing some measures up in the draw up above on the hillside to try and capture debris and dissipate energy in the event that we do get these heavy cloud bursts. Fortunately, if there's any silver lining to this, is that we're getting close to the end of our rainy season. So we've upped our response. We now have crews up there, our maintenance forces that are on the road, traveling that stretch of highway between Cascade and Cave of the Winds 24/7. So they're in a position where, based upon either visual, rain gauge amounts, National Weather Service advisories, taking all that information into account, that they can respond very quickly to and then put a road closure in place, so that hopefully we can avoid an event that trapped vehicles up there in floodwaters that occurred last Friday.
Thank you. Mayor Snyder?
Thank you, Tom. And specifically, if you could address, my understanding is the Waldo Canyon infrastructure that you've been trying to get and not getting a break with at all. I understand that. But I read that you were considering a concrete channel to just bring that water under the highway so as to protect the highway. But obviously, that will just carry it even quicker downstream towards my community. So I'm wondering, is that true that you are re-engineering and starting from scratch on Waldo? Is that the plan? And is there any plans to perhaps maybe divert that water into some retention, whether it's the Greenstone Quarry or whatever options you may be exploring with that? And then also maybe a timeline on when the west entrance into Manitou Springs might be reopened?
You've asked me a number of questions there, and I really don't have answers at this point. And it's not our intent to bring any floodwaters down on top of the city of Manitou Springs any more quickly than it is occurring at this point in time. We do need to make measures or take measures to protect the highway so that we don't lose that lifeblood, US 24, from Colorado Springs up to the mountain communities. So if we, along with improvements to, you say a concrete line channel would be what we refer to as likely a box culvert, a larger structure that would carry a greater flow than the pipe that's in place right now. There's an 8-foot or 7-foot diameter pipe that's carrying the flows right now. I believe it's either 6 or 8 foot, and it's not adequate for the rainfall that we're seeing. So that's where we're getting that overtopping and that 3-foot wall of water that's headed downstream in a location where we don't want it, right in the middle of the roadway of the westbound traffic. So that's our major hurdle that we're trying to overcome at this point, is trying to stop that particular incident from reoccurring. So, likely that water needs to be transported underneath the roadway to the other side into the channel. I can't tell you whether that's going to result in, it shouldn't result in any increased flows to Manitou. It may just be getting there from a slightly different location, but it's all entering the Fountain Creek at one point or another. And at the point it's entering there now in the high condition is completely unacceptable, where it's washing out the roadway and it's causing flooding conditions. So we're going to try and get that into the ditch, try and drop that water off the Rainbow Falls, and where it needs to be, rather than the roadway conveying the flow, because you see what's happening there. We will undergo measures that will hopefully dissipate the energy of that water as well and capture debris along the way. It's very challenging.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd like to work with the communities involved, all the agencies, to see if we can come up with a better plan. We've got some folks some very talented folks that are in our Rockfall program at CDOT. That's their expertise, and they've got some great ideas as far as using something similar to applying the technology that we use in Rockfall with Rockfall fences, and perhaps creating some sort of a system of I wouldn't say reservoirs, if you will, but fences that can actually hold back debris, the timber, the large rocks that are finding their way down the mountainside right now, and perhaps we can capture that above and reduce the amount of the debris that causes lots of problems and slow down the flow as well.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I was worried, I guess, that the idea was just to convey that, and I understand the absolute need to protect the highway, but I think we have to do it in a way that doesn't just move the debris and problem downstream, so I appreciate that. And then as to our west entrance into Manitou Springs, I read somebody was quoted as saying, it might be a month or so. I'm wondering if you have any more details on how you're going to address that and what a timeline might be.
And I can't give you anything definite on that, Mayor. My estimate would be that a month would be quick. Okay. I would think that would probably be the fastest that we'd be able to get that road open to traffic again. It'll likely be a longer period of time. We'll need to get a contractor selected quickly and get them mobilized and start building that roadway back from the bottom up, and that's quite a challenge given the height of that fill slope and the amount of material that needs to go back in there to get that road rebuilt and stabilized.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have been joined by Board Member Mayor Howells from Fountain And in the audience, we have Representative Pete Lee. Pete, we appreciate you coming. I realize a few more months you'll be busy elsewhere again, but thanks for being here. Item number 4 is our consent items. Unless anyone has a reason to pull any of those off, we'll act on them as a whole. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, committee reports, Transportation Advisory Committee. Tom?
Good morning. We had a fairly quiet meeting, most of the meeting anyway, if Craig can attest to that. And we actually have another meeting tomorrow, so we're a little bit behind on the reporting because of the way the schedule works out. But at our last meeting on July 18th, we approved, we recommended for approval TIP Amendment number 7 and the Unified Planning Work Program, both of which are on your agenda today for your approval. We also discussed projects for the potential ballot initiative, and we actually came up with a different list than was originally presented to us. If I could just briefly go down the pecking order. We have an A list and a B list. The A list is the Cimarron interchange, second Fillmore interchange, then Powers South widening, then Powers Old Ranch interchange. Then coming up from nowhere, at the request of Colorado Springs, was Powers Research Parkway interchange. It was felt that that would, if that was left out, there would be a whole bunch of free traffic, and then all of a sudden a traffic light, and then a whole bunch of free traffic again once the other interchanges to the north are built, and most of them are. So we thought that was a pretty important project to get finished for the free flow of traffic on Powers. The next was US 24 widened to 8th Street and the interchange at 8th Street. Then Colorado Avenue Business Route de-evolution. US 24 and Meridian realignment, US 24 widening from 8th Street to 21st, and US 24 widening from Falcon Highway to Ellicott Highway out east. Our B list, which we sort of broke out as a still important, but not as important as the A's. We had the Powers Central Freeway interchange improvements. That's the central section of Powers. Then the extension of Powers from I-25 to State Highway 83, and then the Powers Stewart interchange. So the total cost for A and B list is about $645 million, which is, of course, way over what it's supposed to be. But that was the order of priority that the TAC felt we would like to recommend. We also talked a little bit, Craig talked about the ramp project identification, and that the findings and rankings will hopefully be completed by now. And then at the September Transportation Commission, there'd be a final approval of the ramp projects. We're sort of in the middle of this, and nobody knows exactly where everything is right now. Then there's a year-end status report that Craig gave on all of the projects on the state fiscal year-end status report. Craig will probably talk a little bit more about that because their staff was supposed to look into some differences between the TIP and the STIP that we noticed. And then finally, Craig talked about CDOT and the NHS, the National Highway System program, and how CDOT's answers were not quite what we were hoping for. So we have invited William Johnson from CDOT to speak at our TAC tomorrow, and we should learn more at that time. So that's about it. If you have any questions?
Questions? Yes, Mayor Snyder.
Hi, Tom. So, the board had been operating with one single list, and I'm wondering what spurred the idea of an A and a B list?
Because we couldn't put everything on the A list because of the funding levels, we did want to make it known that the B list projects were important, and that if there was any possibility of them getting on a list, those were the projects that we wanted to have on the list in that priority. So they're kind of it's a second wish list. The first is the real wish list, and the second is the sort of sub-wish list. Okay. So we wanted to identify the projects on there.
So is it the tax recommendation then that, for instance, B13 is a higher priority than A4? I mean, is the order...
No, the priority goes, from top to bottom.
All right, so the last one on the A list is a higher priority than the first one on the B list?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I assumed, but as I read this, it looked, with some of the Bs up into the, fourth and fifth position, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that two of the three are on the B list is they're really expensive, and they would take a lot of projects off the A list if we were to put them on the A list. The sum total of 11 and 12 is $310 million. That just wipes out everything on the A list. So because of their expense, they sort of drop down a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Miller.
I have a question as to process, how this will get finalized out of this body as the initiative comes forward. As a new member, I guess I'd be interested to know how that will eventually make its way through this body.
That would be us, and is that our hope, is to have a final list by the end of this meeting?
Correct. Do you have an agenda item to talk about that? This is the TAC version.
Today is the day that we're...
Yeah.
So CDOT requested the list from around the state by the end of the month. And so others have already got their list in at the request of CDOT. So your citizen committee and transportation committee, they're doing their report now, but there's an agenda item to try to bring it all together and have a recommendation from this board to CDOT by today.
It's a big task.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
CAC, Community Advisory Committee. Jim, welcome.
Good morning. Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. The CAC meeting approved TIP Amendment 7, but I would like to maybe explain how the CAC took a different approach on the project list, if you will. We were presented with tax A and B list, and in discussing those projects with staff and information, it came to light that one of the criteria of CDOT's request was that the projects be ready to go at the time this ballot issue may pass. And so that means having environmental studies and the other kinds of things already done or completed in order to facilitate an acceleration of the project once it was done. And as we were presented with the tax list, several of the projects, and I'm sorry I don't have the notes on exactly which ones, but several of the projects in the tax A list had not had the environmental study done on them. And what we were concerned about was if that went forward and CDOT looked at that, it didn't meet criteria and would be eliminated from the list without consideration. And we didn't think that we needed that. We wanted projects that met the criteria and we didn't get eliminated before for some administrative area that by non-compliant. So we also looked at the ongoing list that Mayor Snyder, you referred to, was we've had a standing list. This body has had a standing list, and we thought severely altering that may send the bad message that we've been working so hard to establish some consistency with CDOT in terms of the projects on our list. And so the CAC felt pretty confident, felt very important to try to maintain the integrity of that list, certainly the top half of that list, and also make sure that it met the criteria for the CDOT request on the ballot initiative. And so our list consisted of what you saw there. We didn't see anything wrong with having a B list in case there were some other projects that had come into consideration that the municipalities wanted to bring forward as consideration, but we didn't feel like that we needed to tweak the A list that much. So you see our list there, and that's the CAC's recommendation. That was about it from the CAC, the important things that I want to bring to your attention. So I'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Mayor Snyder.
Did you have the benefit of the tax list? You considered the list?
We did. We had both the original list of Figure 1 and Figure 2 from the TAC report. We had their list and the original list for our consideration.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, Norm Steen.
Yeah, just noticing that there's a few numbers are different between the TAC list and the CAC list in terms of numbers, size. For example, on the TAC list, the Fillmore interchange is 13 million, or 11 million. On the CAC list, it's 13 million, $2 million higher.
There were some correct.
Yep. Yeah, between the TAC meeting and the CAC meeting, we got some updated cost estimates. CDOT's, one of their interest things went up from like 4.5% to 5% or some, made a small difference there. And we also got good numbers. The original cost we thought of the US 24 East was $80 million. It's actually $27 million, so that project cost went down pretty dramatically. But then on pretty much all the other projects there, CDOT redid some of the numbers using current bids, and project costs went up from, anywhere from 3 to 10%. So we tried to incorporate the newest information as we went through.
Howard's research went from 20 to 25.
Yep. So.
Jim, I understand you're going to be losing a board member.
A board member.
From the CAC?
He's on the RTA CAC, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Ray's been a very active participant in the CAC and provided considerable input as a citizen attending our meetings and interest in what we do. And we're going to miss Ray in the community, I think, it'd be a fair statement for across all of the PPACG, RTA, and the involvement in the transportation community. So the CAC wishes Ray the best of luck.
Well, Ray, I probably should have handled that during public comment. I was thinking you were on this Citizens Advisory Committee, but it's because you're such a regular and so involved that I could probably assume you're on almost any of our Citizens Advisory Committees and be fairly accurate. But
Ray Kruger's citizen or civilian. I've spent about 4 or 5 years coming to the board meetings and CAC meetings and TAC meetings and CTAB meetings as a civilian, not on anybody's staff or representing an interest. So it was all very self-conscious because I'm old, I'm tired, and now I'm moving away to where I can live in a community where mobility is aided by proximity and public transportation, where I can electrify my bike to get over the hills, Seattle. It's the second hilliest city in the country, I think, behind San Francisco. And I won't have a personal car. I will have a zip car half a block away where I can choose from 2 cars for hourly rentals. And they're doing smart car deployments. They're putting out 500 cars in a city of like 65 square miles for one-way trips. So it's like a bike rental car. But they still have a parking problem. It costs $40 a day to park downtown. They don't want people to park downtown. They make it real obvious. So that's what I'm doing, taking care of my end-of-life transition.
Well,
because I see that. I'm old. I'm tired.
I wish you the best, and as a native of the Northwest, I would encourage you to buy some decent rain gear.
I will. I've started.
Mayor Snyder.
Well, Ray, I'm personally going to miss you. I know we really came together back on the Fort Steering Committee, and you've been a tireless advocate for transportation, public transportation, mobility in this community. We're going to miss you, but I want to remind you that Alaska Airlines is starting direct flights November 2nd. So hopefully, after a little bit of time, maybe you'll come back and visit with us.
Well, I respect Alaska Airlines. I wasn't sure about Frontier. And actually, where I'm going to live, it has a walkability index of 94 out of 100. My neighborhood that I left was 42, I think. It was not encouraged. I'm going to have 2 buses right in front of where I live. One has a bus stop right there. I'll be a block from 14 other routes, which act as a hub. So I'll be 15 minutes from downtown, except during rush hour.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate all you've done for this community. Regional Advisory Council. Cheryl, is that you today?
Yes, that is. Hello, my name is Cheryl Dingwell-Kekritz, and I'm on the Regional Advisory Council. I'm the vice chair, and I'm filling in for Bill Gamble, who is busy today. And so here I am, and this will be my first time making a report. So if you have any questions, you feel free to ask me afterwards. In the summer, it's always my favorite time of year because we do road trips, and we go to various towns. And this month, we went to Shawnee, and some of the things that we've worked on recently is we assess the different vendors for senior programs, and usually we have a rather marathon meeting in February where all the vendors, which are several, make their presentations all at once, and we gather that information, and then we propose a budget back to the State Unit on Aging. So we have come up with a new plan this year, and it's going to give the providers a better opportunity to meet with the RAC and make us better informed. So we're going to have probably a couple vendors at each meeting, and it will be embedded into our agenda, and they'll be at each meeting. That way we can hear what those agencies and those providers do, and we'll only focus on a couple each month, and then that should make us better informed at the spring meeting. And then at that spring meeting, then everyone will come in and we'll have an opportunity to meet with them. We'll have kind of a trade show venue where we can go and ask the different agencies and providers what services they provide and ask questions one-on-one. So that was one major thing we did. Also, Ed Shackelford made a presentation to the RAC, and we have created, we're creating a group that will be a liaison to the senior lobby, and I will be leading that Colorado Springs senior lobby group with the state group. And last but not least, the Park County Senior Coalition moved their new office in Fairplay into the county office building. So a lot is happening in the senior community. Any questions?
Wonderful. Questions? Enjoy your trip up to Park County, did you?
Yes, it was very nice. And the roads were dry that day.
Thanks, Mark. They appreciated that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mobility Coordinating Committee. I don't know that we have anybody here to present. If not, the report will stand as printed. Okay, moving on. Action items. 6A, fiscal year 2013 Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Budget Amendment. Beverly Majewski.
Good morning. Since the original budget was approved in December, PPACG staff have pursued and been awarded several grants that add $913,000 in grant income and related grant expenditures. The additional grants awarded are 100% funded, so we are not requesting an increase in member dues today. And that's the good news. Adult resources, the additional funding is for adult resources for care and help for $450,000 from the Colorado Health Foundation. We will be utilizing $50,000, and the remainder of that goes to other AAAs in the state because we are the fiscal agent. Connect for Health Colorado was approximately $198,000, and that's the portion of a $500,000 grant that is estimated to be performed in this calendar year under the Affordable Care Act to assist uninsured folks in our area to sign up for health insurance. The AAA pass-through funding of $125,000, which you had previously heard about, and Transportation Sharp 2 funding of $140,000 for an ecological planning implementation grant. MIPA funding of $15,000 to assist seniors in navigating Medicare, long-term care, and supplemental insurance. And then the transportation DOLA funding went down 30,000 because we estimated 100,000 in our original budget, and the grant turned out to be 70,000. So the major categories of expenditures that increased due to the additional income are personnel costs for staffing the services performed for these grants and contract services, which is the expense category where pass-through to subcontractors is accounted for. The PPACG staff recommend that the board approve the 2013 budget amendment resolution as presented. Are there any questions?
Questions on our amended budget, proposed amended budget? Councilmember Miller.
Thank you very much. I just was wondering what the net was. I saw the grant awards, and then I saw the conglomerate of the grant programs and the expenditures. Is there a net for this new change?
There's a net of 0, and that's how these grants are set up. They are expense reimbursement based, so we don't make a profit on them, or and we don't expend any funds that aren't grant reimbursed.
So those figures that are there for the 6 items, are they inclusive of the associated expenses then?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
you,
you.
Beverly. Item B, fiscal year 2013 through 18 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment Number 7. Brian, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Brian Vituli with PPACG's Transportation Program. We're asking for your approval of TIP Amendment Number 7. This is for our Transportation Improvement Program. The City of Colorado Springs requested the addition of 2 projects into our TIP. The first is Safe Routes to School project. This is along Van Buren Street. So going west to east, it impacts the schools of Mann Middle School, Stratton Elementary, and then Audubon Elementary on the east. It consists of ADA ramps and 4 improved crossings, mid-block crossings. This project is funded at 80%. This is a change. The Safe Routes to School program used to fund at 100%, but with the change with MAP 21, it's now an 80% federal share. The second project is a $724,000 bridge rehabilitation project for 4 structures on Circle Drive. And this is in the vicinity of Hancock Expressway and Las Vegas Street. Municipalities can apply to CDOT for federal bridge off-system highway funds. CDOT administers the process. They select the projects. With assistance from the Colorado Municipal League, they administer the process. They recommended that these 4 structures be funded, and both this project and the Safe Routes to School project will be programmed for 2014. Details can be seen in Attachment 1. You'll see the request letter from the City of Colorado Springs, a letter from a representative from the Colorado Municipal League, and a table from the Safe Routes to School Project Selection Committee. Attachment 2 is the proposed tip table, and Attachment 3 is a resolution of approval. All committees, Transportation Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee, and PPACG staff recommend approval. Are there any questions?
Questions for Brian? Commissioner Steen.
Question on the local match, is that a Colorado Springs City match, or?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes, for both projects.
Other questions? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Before we vote, Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, I just have a question on, again, as a new board member, the process in the city, the committee that decided on the projects for this, what is the makeup of that?
Well, I believe that the Special Highway Committee is composed of municipal representation. So there's county commissioners, elected officials, basically. It's a committee made up by CDOT. They review the projects, score the projects, and then pass the recommendation on to the Transportation Commission for approval. So it's a separate body that's made up of elected officials to review these projects and select them.
Kathleen, would you like to?
I'll help you on that one. You were good. Kathleen Krager, City Traffic Engineer for Colorado Springs. And I thought maybe I'd try to answer that question from another manner. The process within the city to determine which projects we go after is done by city staff. And we're specifically looking at first where our needs are and how well it matches the money that might be out there that we can get and what we have for local match. Our local match usually comes from, we have two sources. We have general fund local match, and we have PPRTA funds that we also use for local match. So the Safe Routes to School project would have come from the Traffic Engineering Department, from their transportation planning section for pedestrian use. And the Circle Bridges came from City Engineering, and that's a much larger project that will be coming through with PPRTA funding, but this gets us started with design work. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? With that, we'll call the roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
6C, fiscal year 2014 and 15 Unified Planning Work Program.
Hi, Yolanda Roberts, PPACG. The Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, is one of the federally required products of a metropolitan planning organization. The UPWP is developed for a 2-year period, and it incorporates into one document all federal, state, regional, local, and air quality transportation planning activities. It gives an annual schedule of work that identifies how funds will be spent. Some typical tasks include GIS planning or the travel demand model, and then major products like the TIP and the long-range plan. Funding is provided by a federal grant from FHWA and FDA, and it's administered through CDOT. Funds are allocated to PPACG on a matching ratio of roughly 80 to 20%, and those funds are listed in Table 1 of the UPWP scope of work, and I think that's attachment 2 in your packet. This UPWP was prepared and reviewed by staff from CDOT, FHWA, FDA, Mountain Metropolitan Transit, and TAC through May, June, and July of this year. The TAC recommended the UPWP at their July meeting, and this UPWP was also brought to this board in June as an information item. And all the comments that we received are included in attachment 3 through the whole document development process. So are there any questions?
Questions for Yolanda? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Gruen.
I was just waving at Commissioner Clark.
Okay. Good thing this wasn't an auction. You guys would have just bought something. So I think I heard a motion to approve. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Yolanda. Appreciate the fact you understand that all well enough to make it legal and legit.
And so do I.
D is our Impact 64 ballot initiative proposal. Craig Casper.
Good morning, Craig Casper, Transportation Director. In June, Herman Stockinger from CDOT came and asked PPACG to provide a list of projects to potentially put on a ballot initiative in November of 2014. We discussed it briefly in the advisory committees and at the board here in July, and then between the July board and now, we took it back through the committees and had some more detailed discussions. The preliminary list that was brought to the TAC and CAC was, as we discussed last month at the board, based on the board's adopted resolution for project priorities, and then going beyond that, based on the projects funded in the long-range plan that scored well were in the priority of the long-range plan. Those priorities in the long-range plan were developed based on not just transportation factors, but we collaborated with a lot of other agencies, because transportation investments are impacted by other investments and other decisions that other agencies are making. So we went through, TAC had a very good discussion about concerns and priorities, transportation priorities. They developed a list that you see, and if you look at the table, their list is the second list over the TAC recommended priority list. They broke their list, as Tom discussed earlier, into A list and a B list, and then prioritized within those first priority, second priority, third priority. We took those two lists, the original list from the July board meeting and the TAC list to the CAC, as was discussed again earlier. The CAC kept the A and B concept, tweaked the order of the projects a little bit, and didn't prioritize them. They said they didn't really feel comfortable doing that. They just kept them as here's an A list and here's a B list. Staff took those recommendations, presented them to you, and used them in considering our recommendation. The one change from last month's recommendation is adding the Powers Research Parkway interchange project into the priority list. That is a project that was actually funded and then unfunded to get I-25 widening done. It is a needed project, and as was discussed, if you get Research Parkway done, you get a nice section of freeway. Without Research Parkway done, you have interchange at grade, and it creates some unpredictability from a driver's standpoint. So just trying to create a good, solid freeway section, and it's a needed project. We have a target-rich environment for needed transportation projects. So the research is a solid project. Are there any questions?
Questions? Councilmember Miller.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time that we start the food fight about this.
It really is, including where we draw the line in terms of dollar amount, because CDOT has asked for one thing. We've kind of taken a little independent stance on that and been willing to add above their requested dollar amount. What are they looking for, about $300 million?
Yes. Yeah, I think in the memo it talks about when Herman was here a month ago, he said shoot for about $300 million. But obviously, when we calculate 0.7 sales tax in this region, it comes up to $500 million. And I think the board discussed that's probably a reasonable target, that the dollars in should roughly equal the dollars out as a starting point. Then you can deviate from that at your leisure. But from a staff perspective, we offer that number in the board. I think gave the direction, and there's no surprise that the committees came up with numbers above that mark.
So let the games begin. Joel, you have the floor.
Well, Les, maybe I could ask you to weigh in on that, to expect that our share, I mean, we've had this discussion of what is our share versus what is realistic in this from the CDOT perspective. I mean, they've asked for 300. Our tax share with 0.7 cents would, not our share, but the amount we'd be putting in would be 500. Do you have any thoughts? Should we stick with the? I mean, obviously we're going to give projects that are more than whatever they ask for, probably on both counts. But what is the feeling on how this is going to play out with the ballot measure?
Number one, Councilman, good morning. This isn't a CDOT ballot. I think CDOT is trying to participate from a technical standpoint. To directly answer your question, I don't think, and I haven't thought for years, it's particularly productive for us to say in this community or to calculate what we believe our proportionate share is, because I just don't think the allocations work that way. I do think it makes sense to say that these are our needs, and to the extent possible to prioritize those needs. When guidance is provided of one figure and it's being provided throughout the state, to try to come up with some balance so that, and the reason that that number was arrived at was so that everyone could theoretically get their fair share in some sort of an initiative. When it goes to ballot, that number was provided. So to come beyond that, I'm not sure how productive that is unless it's prioritized, and there's a way to get to that number easily.
So in other words, if the things we really, really want, we should stick within the guidelines.
It sure would be helpful. We've been fighting for that for years around here, and it's one thing to say we deserve more, but everyone thinks they deserve more. So I'm just going to argue strongly that we come up with things that are really, really important to us around the number that was provided, because if there is a ballot issue, everyone's going to hopefully be doing the same thing, and everyone could get things that they need.
Also, if you want to look at this from a regional perspective, Park County's 0.7% is going to be something like 350,000. I mean, it's going to be almost nothing, and we you guys need good roads up to the mountains from Colorado Springs, so people come and land here and stay here and then come up to the mountains. So that's important also. And we have to think about things like Glenwood Canyon that Wayne Williams points out was never have been built. It was local funding that had to support it. So there's projects around the state that also need regional or statewide support. My feeling.
Thank you.
Yes, coming from a poor county.
So just going along these lines, the question I have is, we have the full amount for all these projects, and these are ones that we've asked from multiple different sources to complete. The Cimarron's one example. I mean, we're still waiting on the ramp application. We've got the Powers and Old Ranch has been largely funded for 2015 out of PPRTA, but we've got the full amount listed on here. How does it affect our request to do these things if in the meantime, between now and the ballot, these things are funded? And then, do they just go down to the next?
Yeah, my understanding in talking with Herman is that they're happy that we put all of our ramp projects on the list, and then if those or when our projects are selected for ramp funding, we would take those off, and the list would just be a smaller amount.
So they wouldn't move up our next priority, it would just be a smaller amount.
Our request would be smaller and added to the
So
ramp.
if we gave them 6 projects as an A, and one of those is funded, they wouldn't go to our B to move one up for us, assuming dollars were about
I think that would be part of the fine-tuning between the ramp announcement and the actual development of the ballot list, which I think is finalized in March or April is when they're going to really want to have a final list.
So I guess, it's a balancing act between we want to make sure we keep the same priorities, so they wonder, that they don't want to think that we're schizophrenic. Hey, you said this was a priority here, but here it's not. How come? But at the same time, do we have risk that the state's going to go, oh, well, we're already considering that for this grant. Let's not put it on. It seems like it's sort of competing priorities. And the reason I ask, too, is for me, I think for the city from just an economic vitality standpoint, too, is that Powers extension. I was happy to see it on the CAC's recommended A list. But I think that's huge for our airport. We talk about our airport and the catchment area. Neil's here somewhere. But I think it's very important for any potential carriers to be able to draw passengers from the north. I think it's we're building all these interchanges on Powers, and if they don't end up going anywhere and they just sort of dead end at Interquest like they do now, it's kind of like what's the point? But at the same time, because it's an urban renewal area there at Copper Ridge, we have some incremental funding that will likely be beginning probably, before the end of the year. So it's not going to be $204 million. So my question is when these projects are funded, or if they're chosen, I mean, that would be a long-term issue. I just wonder how it would happen if one is in progress and you don't really know what the amount is. But I just think
my concern with the Powers extension is the fact that it takes up two-thirds of what's been asked for. So kind of back to your opening statements, is that 204 the real number? Is something else is being funded through RTA? If there's development participation, does that 204 really become 125 or something?
do we have to put the full amount on there? Because it might be less likely to get funded, whereas if we're only asking for a part of it and we put that amount on there, then, it's maybe more likely. I don't know. Wishful thinking, maybe.
If I could maybe give a suggestion on that, Councilman Miller. We have been looking at funding on Powers a number of different ways, because I think we all realize that it's such a big project that the whole pot of money cannot possibly come from one source. And if we were to receive $100 million from CDOT for the Powers extension and combine that with URA and some PPRTA money that we have set aside, that would get us to where we need to be on Powers. Powers extension is also something that is feasible. So even if the URA money isn't available at the same time that the CDOT money is, we can still provide phases of Powers and complete the entire project at some point in time. I also wanted to add your question about the ramp projects. This sort of bothers me that they are asking for this list a month before we find out ramp and a month before we find out a Tiger grant. And, I'm just wondering if maybe a slowdown isn't a little bit more practical here, because I think that this list has the ability to change a great deal after we find out about ramp and Tiger. The other point that I was going to make, and of course it will be a little bit wacko, but you would expect that from me, so I'll give it to you anyway. And that is that when you're looking at funding sources, it's always important to match the project to the type of funding you're looking for. And so your priority list changes at times because of the funding that's available. Just like when we talk about the Tiger grant, we put Fillmore up for the Tiger grant, even though it's not the number one project from PPACG. But for that type of funding, it's the best project for getting that type of funding. I might point out that when you're looking at a tax like this, which is very much like our PPRTA tax that's done on a project list, this is your opportunity to do some projects that may not test well on our normal testing procedures for, is this the number one project for the TIP? Is this the number one federally funded project? This is a chance for you to fund some projects that may be incredibly popular with the general population, but do not score highly with the way that we score projects for looking at federal funding. So I guess I would just encourage you to take advantage of that, because you don't get that opportunity to fund different projects that often. And I think that ultimately, having gone through this with PPRTA, ultimately the Impact 64 committee is going to look at the projects and ask themselves what projects are going to garner the most votes from the region that they're in, because that's the goal. That's the reason why you have a project list on the ballot for a tax initiative like this.
And not to put too fine a point on that, if all of the projects are Powers, or the majority of the projects are Powers, that'll bring in a lot of votes in a certain corridor, but not necessarily throughout the region. So-
Which, exactly like PPRTA, we always tried very hard to spread our projects throughout the region so that, everyone was getting a little of something.
Thank you.
Exactly right.
Rob?
And I think everything that's been said seems to be on target where the board's at. You've been through a long planning process. Your list of priorities have been in the form of a couple of numbers like 1 and 2, and then bulleted list. And I think to take advantage of everything you've heard, that if you get a Tiger grant that shows up, and Kathleen's exactly right, this board said for a Tiger grant, Fillmore makes the most sense. You're not violating your bulleted priority list, but you're not leapfrogging without good reason. And so when you came up with your list as a starting point last month, that was that list, check marks in case instead of bullets as you see now. Commissioner Gruen's right on the mark too, that anyone who's developing this is not a CDOT ballot initiative, but CDOT and all the MPOs and other participants are trying to get a list together. The funding you saw at the presentation that Herman gave, but it's not CDOT derived. It's from the Denver metro area that started this, the Denver Metro Mayor's Caucus, the County Commissioners Caucus up there. And so now it's spreading into what would you do if you had this value of money. And we don't know the details. It's not written yet. And so as the board talked about, you take your best shot of these are the long-standing priorities. If the Impact 64 group, whomever they turn out to be, hopefully one of you are on that committee too, to weigh in. Why does PPACG prioritize these projects, or do you want to have a split between transit, maintenance, big corridors, bridges, safety, whatever that is, they don't really know yet. And so right now the request was, let's start with about $300 million. This board said, well, that's nice, but we want to make sure that if we're going to ask your constituents to put up $500 million, most of them are going to ask you, well, what do we get? The answer is really hard for all of you, I would imagine. I won't speak for you, but to say you're going to subsidize the rest of the state by $100 million, $200 million, that messaging seems difficult from a staff perspective, because if you put $500 million into an Impact 64 derived process, again, it's not a CDOT process. So when we talk about fair share, I think it's fair, and you all asked, for Impact 64 to address it. If we put that money in, why are we subsidizing RTD in Denver? Why are we subsidizing anything else outside of this region? Fair question. And so I think that's where you were last month, and your list came up to about $534 million, right around that $500 million. The Impact folks may not settle on 0.7 cent sales tax. They may add something else to that. They may expand or contract that based on other influences. So staff perspective, you see we didn't come up with a recommendation. You see our proposal was to take yours and add one, because that's been your running list for 10 years. None of these projects really have been added except for the research project. And so all of that said, we're asking today for a list to submit to this process. We know this process will change. This list may come back with, well, we're going to now change it to make it half transit. So can you reconfigure your list to add transit projects? But we just simply don't know that. So we're trying to go from your existing processes of long-range plan, which you spend years doing, the 6-year transportation improvement program, you spend another couple of years. All of that, you've got priorities. And depending on funding sources, as everyone has been saying, you reserve the right to say, we're putting this project in for that particular funding source, whether it's Tiger, RAMP, Impact 64, ARA funds that we had a few years ago. Once you have that priority list, and I think you've done this over the last 10 years, you'll submit projects that match up to criteria that we, the state, anyone brings forward to you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
So we're not being asked whether we're for or against some theoretic ballot initiative right now. We're just being asked to take a look at whether we agree with this list of projects that would be submitted for a potential ballot initiative should it come about. And so I think, and of course this is just me, but I really believe that we need to just stay on track and stay on target with our current list. We know that there's other potential funding sources that may come in or out, depending on what's going on with the ramp projects and things that are happening now. So I guess some direction would be helpful, and obviously some discussion as to, if we go ahead and submit, and obviously this may be more than we would even get out of a ballot initiative, but I think we go for, this is our confirmed list. I'm pretty comfortable with what I see up there. I know that Colorado Avenue Business Route Devolution Project, that's RTA as well, so that's being funded through other sources also, and I think we're pretty well set with that. I don't know about the other lower items there on the list, and I don't think we're going to get another $106 million out of it for Powers, although I think that would be great. I'm comfortable with leaving the list as is, because I think if anything different, and then see what comes out, because we don't even know, this ballot initiative hasn't even been really discussed, but it keeps us on track and on target with what we've already said, and it keeps consistency, unless, Rob, you think we need to pull something out because it's going to be funded somewhere else, and I get what Kathleen was saying, but I'm pretty comfortable with with the little check marks today. So that's just this commissioner, though. I don't know how everyone else is coming down.
Thank you. Commissioner Dwalaby?
Norm and I went to a transit meeting in Canyon City a couple weeks ago, and they're talking about 1/3 of this being transit. And is that right? I think that's what I heard, 1/3. And so if we're concerned about the effect on Teller and Park County, and also a question I have is I don't see anything on this list for transit for this area. It's not really for me to worry about, but I'm wondering if that's something, is that other 2/3 of that, 1/3's going to Denver, the way I understood it, and then of the transit part, and then the other 2/3 are going to go throughout the state perhaps. And Norm and I were concerned that if we don't say, oh yeah, we need it for transit, then we're not going to get any, and if is the MPO going to go for that transit money? And if that money, if we're not going to go for that money for transit in our counties, could we use that as like matching funds? Is there a way that could go towards matching funds for counties that don't have any matching funds?
Craig, go ahead.
There's $200 million out of the 605 estimated that would go to transit. 120 of that comes off the top to go to RTD. Of the remaining 80, the current breakdown looks like $37 million statewide to current public transit providers in some formula by population or by ridership, or they haven't figured that part out yet. $15 million would be used to operate CDOT's regional bus, the I-25 and I-70 interregional bus systems. $10 million would be available every year for competitive grants for major projects if we wanted to build a trolley system or something in Colorado Springs. $8 million would go directly to elderly and disabled transit agencies based on some formula that has not yet been determined. $5 million would be for CDOT use in purchasing buses and expanding park and rides for their I-25 and I-70 systems. And $5 million would be for CDOT planning, because they need to do planning and some analysis for that. So that would be, so there's 37 and 10, and then I guess the elderly disabled 8. So some portion of 37, 8, and 10 would come to PPACG. My understanding is RTD would not get any of that 80. They would not be eligible to apply for those 37, 10, and 8 because they're already getting 120 off the top. So,
Commissioner Steen?
I guess our concern was whether we'd be directed these funds, the 37, the 8, and the 10, could be used only for transit, or, I mean, we have a list of more than $500 million in asset and management, no transit at all. So we've got a thing that's going to overfill the bucket just on asset management. And our concern was, and Mark and I talked about this, was whether we as an MPO, as a PPACG, ought to have more flexibility than what the Impact 64 group is considering. Whether we ought to be able to, for example, be block granted these funds.
Similar to RTD.
Similar to RTD. Use them for whatever whether it's transit or concrete maintenance or bike paths. Let the PPACG decide through a block grant process rather than have them directed for a specific function.
It seems like the perception to Norm and I when we went into this meeting was, it doesn't matter how much money, just tell us all your needs, just tell us all your needs. And they kept throwing out the, tell us what you need. And it's like, well, what we need is something to chip in to make our 20%, not necessarily all that transit. Because in Park and Teller counties, you don't have the centers and you don't have, where are you going to pick them up? It's more like a taxi cab would work better than a transit. and at that meeting we were at, you're laughing, but wait a minute. There was a taxi cab company at that meeting, and everybody, I don't want to call them piggies, but all the piggies were lining up at the trough to get money from it. Well, this taxi cab money was going, this is killing us. We're getting put out of business because you're giving free buses to everybody. And so this business that was paying taxes and making money and not taking away from the general fund is all of a sudden going to get pitched, and somebody that just wants to take as many dollars as they can get for their little projects are all lining up. And I didn't like at all the feeling that we were putting private companies out of business that could operate at a profit by giving away free shuttles. And in Park County, I started finding out, just like I always do when I complain at these meetings, how much money Park County's getting. And so we have our 6 vans that maybe one person will be riding in at a time. And the economy of scale and to give us the opportunity to make decisions for ourselves rather than saying, here, line up at the trough. The question is, who decided that's what we need?
Yeah, so whether
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The concern here is whether we got to have some flexibility in deciding whether it's 2/3 asset, 1/3 transit, or whether that's a state impact group decision, or whether we as a PPACG MPO to have some decision on that proper split. And Rob brought it to mind. So,
Rob, is there a state impact group that is deciding that, or has that already been decided via governor's office, or?
Not to my knowledge, and I know Les has been tied into this, Craig's been tied into this, and some of the others with CML, CCI. The group in Denver that pushed this forward, I think they're at the stage, and CDOT is being the messenger. They're trying to quantify what's the total need. Because when they say $120 million to RTD, they don't list the $120 million of projects that RTD will be doing. And so part of, we think, is still out there is input to this process, because it hasn't been written yet. I mean, it's still kind of gelling and working. As you saw the presentation, it's in your packet, they started talking about gas tax. And they did some polling and said, oh, that doesn't seem to work well, so let's look at a sales tax. And then, they look at the model that locally we did with the Transportation Authority. There was capital, maintenance, and transit. They're doing that a little bit with this because there is a transit component, there's a capital, and there may be a maintenance piece. So I think this recommendation we'd give as staff is whomever's doing this process, this board could have a comment into that process, maybe along the lines that, Norm, you're talking about, that allow the flexibility to whatever group. Could be MPO, could be Mountain Metro Transit, because Mountain Metro Transit, I think I saw Craig in the crowd, they've been asked to come up with a list if there was a rough range of money, do they have projects that could go in? If they haven't been asked, they probably would be as RTD, because that $120 million for RTD wasn't just picked out of the air. It was based on some rough priority list that they had. So I think this board could weigh into the process wherever it stands. I would suggest maybe here's our list of projects, but we also would like to be part of the discussion to help decide how this is going to work, whether it's a block grant type to MPOs or CDOT regions or whatever it may be, because right now it covers everything from CDOT, municipalities, counties. I don't think towns are in there yet, but whatever that allocation is, there's buckets of money apparently now. I think that conversation should be weighed in by this board.
Okay, Commissioner Gruen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would tend to agree with a lot of what Rob said. However, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. I'm not sure that I or CDOT have been tied into this. We've been informed as this has been going on, and it's been going on for a couple of years. And because of that, I think to a certain extent the train has left the station. It would be worthwhile for PPACG to comment, and I think Commissioner Steen's idea makes some sense. But I think they've tried, the people, and there were some groups in Denver that were, I think, it started primarily as business groups that recognized the need for more transportation funding throughout the state, and then they brought in a variety of other entities that included, I think, the entity that we were represented by was Action 22, which was all the elected officials or has elected representation for Southern Colorado. Then there was Club 20, the group on the West Slope, and then there's a group in the Denver area. So all of those groups collectively were brought together by the Business Coalition, and they created this sort of model to figure out a way to get further transportation funding. And as Rob said, it evolved from the point or from a recognition that a gas tax was not likely to be viable. So my recommendation would be to, if you have comments that you think would benefit the Pikes Peak region, provide them in some sort of resolution or letter along with your list. And this list of 550, we've already commented that it's going to be reduced to a certain extent by presumably some things being funded under RAMP and some things being funded in other processes. So hopefully that number is going to get closer to the $300 target that was recommended initially. That's my recommendation, is just sort of move forward with your thoughts. This sort of list at this point in time probably makes some sense, and refine it as the whole process becomes more refined.
Craig?
If I may, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Division Manager with the City of Colorado Springs and Director of Mountain Metropolitan Transit. You may have moved past my point at this juncture, but with regard to transit, I do want to just add to the comments that both Rob and Craig Casper made that there's a state organization called CASTA, Colorado Association of Transit Agencies, that's working statewide to also give input to this process with regard to transit priorities. They're kind of facilitating the amount of funding that goes to RTD versus others. So just like Rob said, there's continuing input in terms of dollar amounts and projects and how things are allocated. That is going on with transit as well. CASTA represents urban transit agencies, rural transit agencies, and resort transit agencies. And so they are kind of like taking a statewide perspective and trying to facilitate that process. One example of where transit funding does benefit rural areas is when Greyhound and similar bus companies serve small cities, small towns in Colorado, oftentimes they can't make a profit at that, and they will back out of a market and not stop serving a small town. There is a transit program that helps subsidize Greyhound to continue to serve some of those small towns in Colorado. So there are little ways that transit funding does help rural parts and small towns in Colorado as well. So yeah, I think that's an important point. Thanks.
That being said, I guess I would like to ensure that we have a list that should our Tiger and our ramps all be funded, that we're still in the $300 million range. Because I think, as Commissioner Gruen said, this isn't refined. The refining process is yet to go forward. Would it make sense for this to happen, a month or 6 weeks down the road? Probably. But we have two separate groups working on separate timelines. We tend to think of it all as transportation and think, well, can't they just, work together? And has been said, the initiative we're talking about is not a CDOT list. RAMP is a CDOT list. So let's work with what we've got. Commissioner Clark has suggested that we present everything with a check mark, or what was your?
That was my thought, to just go ahead and say that this is our priority list, and we can pare that down as details arrive, I think, with more information. We don't even know what kind of position this board would take on a ballot initiative if it were to come forward. So that's my thought, is to just go ahead and submit our list as is to CDOT with that these are our top priorities, and then the vote's still out. We don't even really know what this whole initiative may look like. So I guess I'll just go ahead and jump out there, and then we can amend if we need to go ahead and approve. I'm trying to look and see what our recommendations from staff are. So to approve forwarding this board specified list to CDOT that's in front of us with the check marks for use in developing the possible ballot measure for November 2014, with the caveat that adjustments to the list will be made over the next year, depending on the outcome of the long-range planning process that is currently underway. So that's where my motion will start.
Let's start with Mayor Snyder.
Just a point of clarification. Were you including staff's recommendation to add the Powers Research Parkway, the 20 million more, or were you going with the original list that this board had developed?
I guess I would turn to Rob and ask for some suggestions on that.
Suggestion would be, I think it's favorably recommended by the TAC and the CAC to add that $20 million project.
So let's just go ahead and do that, and then, so it would be then the list on the far right, which is the staff recommended ballot list, and then, of course, we can amend that as things get a little more solidified.
Second.
Okay. And I'm a little
Commissioner
confused.
Goloby?
Is this group not putting forward transit issues into it, or are they not allowed to go for that transit money? Or I missed that point somehow.
Rob, you want to?
That not the priority, or you already have it covered, or what?
It's under the or what. The PPACG hasn't been asked to weigh in on transit priorities. As Craig was saying, that CASTA and others are being asked to do that. RTD is being asked to do that. Mountain Metro Transit here locally. But the request, again, it came from CDOT. I mean, they were part of that process, but they asked specifically, what are your planned priorities?
Okay, so we're not to that point yet.
We're not to the transit part. Okay. Who knows, they may want to come with non-motorized. They may say, do you have any trails, safe route to schools? It's still evolving as far as what would fall under the ballot question that hasn't been written yet.
Okay, and so this ballot is not coming from CDOT. It's coming from this other group from Denver, and it's kind of like instead of what CDOT would pick for projects, it's what voters would pick for projects. So it's got to be sexier and more appealing to the voter, rather than just plain old projects. It's kind of what I'm getting. So it's interesting. All right.
Smart way to do it.
Mayor Snyder.
Yeah, Commissioner, we are just responding to the request for a list right now. There's a much greater discussion that you're talking about that needs to happen, and I'd like to begin that discussion, frankly, but I think we need to take care of this housekeeping matter.
I agree.
And I know it's not on the agenda, but we do have our Transportation Commissioner here, and perhaps we can give him some, grist for the mill, so to speak, as far as our early take on the proposal here. And I agree, there needs to be a serious conversation about the whole proposal.
Okay.
I think we need to take care of this, but I am on board 100% that before we sign off on anything, we need to have an opportunity.
And just after the meeting Norm and I went to, just the feeling that we were getting, there needs to be, and I'm amazed that they haven't come to the MPO yet, and that they're asking me and Norm or whatever. I mean, it's just, it's amazing to me that they haven't talked to you about transit here. So I don't think it's as important in Park County as it is to this community, and I'm a member of this board, so I feel a responsibility to see that they get a chunk of that money too. That you get whichever we I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Miller.
Yes, first I have a question. for Rob. When we put these priority list on here, it's just like Kathleen said, as far as, do we have to put the full amount of the project? I mean, because...
Thank you.
Because
wanted
I'm
that
looking at
answer,
this
too.
powers extension, and I think if you say, well, if we ask for $100 million, maybe it would be a better opportunity that we'd get it, and that would be enough for us to get the project done, leveraging other opportunities. So do we have to put the full project amount on here to...
There's no requirement to put any amount on there. I think it's a guide to see, as the lists are developed, what are we talking about? Will they get a $5 billion statewide list or half of that? And I think what we've done around here for probably the last decade is we typically ask for the whole quarter amount of dollars, and then once the funding source is defined, then this board has come up to say, well, we're going to do the safety aspect in that corridor, or the interchange, or park and rides, or whatever it is in that corridor. We typically, this board has said, let's do the big interchanges, because they're the hardest things to get. But if you don't get that, then maybe you do a bridge section to make something safer along Powers Boulevard up in your district, up along Briargate or Union. It was an $8 or $10 million project. It wasn't the whole $200 million. When a funding source came available, in that case, bridge funding source, you knock off that $8 to $10 million or $20 or $50 million. But at the beginning, in our plans, we usually put the total amount in, and then if there's specialty funding, then we start clicking down. So it's a judgment call, but the basic answer is nothing's required to put in because it's still evolving of how much money they're talking and where it's going to be allocated.
I guess I would, I'm not sure parliamentary procedure-wise, whether amendments go now to the motion?
Any time.
Okay.
You can always ask for a friendly amendment and see how friendly I am today.
Those aren't recognized in Robert's rules, but they're recognized in most of the meetings I run.
Well, and then point for discussion after the question is, we talked about the need for that research to give a large chunk of freeway on Powers. And to that end, I think having that large chunk is good, but it only makes sense if we plan to connect it to I-25 in the reasonable, not 20-year future. And being that Ms. Kathleen said that, we could do that Powers interchange in a phased way, it wouldn't need the full project amount. I would like to amend the motion to, in addition to keeping the research interchange on there, I'd like to reduce the amount on the Powers extension to $100 million and hopefully move it up the list. And then, just so we're putting all the priority in that big stretch of freeway, and we're not including the Central Freeway, there's two parts of the Powers Central Freeway on there. I would just soon leave both of those off and put the priority toward the research interchange and the Powers extension to 25.
So if we did that, we would reduce the amount by $104 million on the extension and $106 million on the central, so that would bring our total down to something under 350.
The 324. Or are you right?
I have a question for Rob, if I may. Are we submitting the amounts as well as CDOT, or are we just submitting, these are our top pick list projects?
I think
Because, are we, to give them some guidelines, we're submitting amounts of, because we're kind of playing with money that I'm not clear what that money can do. I mean, I look at Cimarron, and obviously 55 million, we've talked about 100 million for that project, so, that may be, but then there's the other sections of that are farther down that may fit into that same project. So I'm just a little unclear as to, do we have to submit the money, or do we just say this is our list of priorities? We'll figure out the amounts later based on what comes through on the ballot initiative.
A couple things. The amounts, as you've seen, have changed from the TAC meeting till today. CDOT is continuously refining the cost estimates for these projects. The reduction in the first one, Cimarron, is built into that is the assumption the Phase 1 of that is
Already in
likely funded.
process, yeah.
And so the remaining for that total project is on this list. And so I think that follows through. CDOT has said, this is how much money it'll cost for the rest of these projects. It's gone pretty much hand in glove to put the dollar amounts with the projects. But as I said, CDOT asked for that, but CDOT's not running this. So it's completely up to this board's discretion whether you put the dollars in or not. Personally, I would think it would help CDOT as they're developing the statewide list to know what they're talking about, $5 billion, $3 billion, or whatever amount. And then negotiate from there once the ballot question is starting to form up. Because it may say, well, boy, we got $5 billion in requests. We're only going to come up with $2.5 billion. So people may need to refine the cost estimate or scopes later in this process. So it's just hard to guess. I would suggest put the dollar amounts with it. Then they have a sense of what the total request from this region is in a priority order or prioritized list, and go from there.
Well, if I might, Mr. Chair, since I'm the motion maker, sorry about that. For instance, the Powers Stewart interchange, I know Kathleen's back there, we've talked about a less expensive possibility for that particular project as well, that it's up there for the ultimate at $40 million, but we think that some great improvements can be done for a much lower cost. So I don't know, it's kind of difficult to be sitting up here deducting, and it's kind of like budget discussions, deducting a few dollars here, in this case millions of dollars here and there, and not really knowing what the impact is. So the timeline, could we have staff go back from the various entities and refine this list a little more so that we really have a more accurate, I mean, do we have to make this decision today, or can we do that in next month after we get back and really look at this from a harder perspective to say, does Stewart interchange really need to be 40, or is it 7, or is it 14, or is it 20? And then see if there's additional savings that we can move around as Councilman Miller suggested.
I think the request, and Craig may have this, CDOT had asked for by this month to have the first list done. You also notice this list from last month's list, we took off I-25 widening, because as you're all driving that, it's almost done. We don't need to keep that on the list.
It's not done. It's not done, yeah.
In our 30-year world, almost done is this calendar year. So, sorry, yeah, there's still plenty of barrels out there. So it's, the only hard request is CDOT would like a list this month. I don't know if anyone from CDOT has any other information as far as can it slip a month. That I don't know. Correct.
Well, I would hate to miss an opportunity here. I would like to give them something by the end of the day. Craig?
All the lists I've seen, and I have seen most of them, have a cost on it. One of the suggestions that Kathleen had at the STAC meeting that got a general murmur of assent is you don't want to have a list bigger than your, so if you think you can get $605 million, you don't put a $605 million list out there, you do 85% of that based on your all's experience with the PPRTA. And so at that point, I think is when, okay, let's start winnowing it down. Let's do 85% or whatever of the project cost, or at that refining stage in March or April, I think is when that's going to be, would be to come up with that. And that gives us some time to say, like 8th Street, does it need to be a full interchange, or can it be a different one? Powers and Stewart, I mean, there's, so have those discussions. So I think my recommendation on the fly is to keep the project cost there with the understanding that we're going to refine the actual work that's going to be done and the dollars that that's going to cost between now and March.
Thank you. Mayor McCafferty?
Yeah, my opinion on this whole situation is that this is a golden opportunity, because looking at this on the face of it, it shows that the state's been paying attention to what we've been doing with PPRTA. Because the concept of that was go to the people with a list, get the money approved before you ever went to it. So I think this would be a good thing to do. It'll help us move forward. The list, as we've learned with PPRTA, can change, within certain parameters. I think it's a good way to go. it's more saleable to people that if they know where their tax money exactly is going to, what exactly it's going to get them, instead of just blanket, we're going to pass a gas tax and it's going to go to quote-unquote transportation, and then they never see the end result. It's probably more equitable this way to move it around. This is in the beginning phases where we have the opportunity to put in a lot of input as to transit or whatnot. As with PPRTA on this last go-around, I went in front of the Citizens Committee on that, and my opinion is, whatever moves you from point A to point B, whether you're walking, on a bike, whatever, is transportation. And those things, as a whole, will affect how everything within the region moves. So I think I'm in favor of this, and if they need a list, let's give them a list. And if we have funding from other sources, we'll either drop it off the list, hopefully be able to negotiate with them that if this is the amount that we're allotted, and we have projects that are funded through other means via PPRTA, ramp, Tiger, whatever, that we are able to keep those funds and reallocate them to something else further down the list.
Thank you. Councilmember Pico?
Yeah, it makes sense to me to keep the list intact in there. We can talk about the priorities and move them around and that sort of thing, and I'd go along with Councilmember Miller's idea of bumping up the priority, but I wouldn't want to drop anything off of that list, and I don't think I'd want to try at this rather initial stage cut the funding that we think is going to be needed unless we have an accurate idea that that's what's going to be needed. So, we can move with that. I think as far as transit goes, I understand that Councilmember Gabler has some discount rails available for transit.
Mayor Snyder?
I just had a question for Craig Casper. Craig, you said you've seen other lists from other jurisdictions?
Yes.
And generally, are they, we've been asked for $300 million, and we're looking at 554. Was that pretty much in line with what you've seen?
North Front Range, I think, was asked for 200 or 250. They put in an A and B list, each for $150 million, so they put in a $300 million list for, I think, a $250 million ask.
Okay.
But they've split theirs into A and B, so.
I see. Thank you.
Councilmember Miller?
Yeah, and just to clarify, the motion on the floor is to approve the staff column, including the purple check mark, which by my calculations would be about 430.
Should be that 554, but I
think that's
didn't
the
do the
total.
math, I just...
That includes those bottom three, I believe.
No.
Total 696.
If you included the bottom three, correct? So it's just including the ones with the check marks, which is probably over and above our likely ask anyway, but at least it gives us a place to start.
Shows the need exists.
Well, and if they want to whittle,
Mayor Snyder?
if they want to whittle down the list, then they can fund these projects, some of these out of ramp. Really, isn't that the unspoken word here right now? Is that we've been playing collaboratively, we've been playing by the rules, and we're $600 million down. I'm telling you, if Cimarron doesn't get funded outside of this process, I don't see how I can go to my voters and tell them to vote for Impact 64.
Right.
I got nothing to give them right now except for a little piece of paper that says $600 million on it. I feel like Charlie Brown and the state's Lucy and transportation funding's a football.
Beautiful analogy.
Councilmember Miller?
Well, I think to that end, I think although we'll have a large part in whether this passes, I think this is a statewide measure. And there's a lot of people that really want transportation projects in and around Denver. And so regardless of whether the numbers pass it here in this individual area, I think there could be a good chance that it would be passed elsewhere. So I think we really need to keep that in mind. I mean, just me personally looking at it. So just because it doesn't pass in this region doesn't mean that it wouldn't pass statewide. So I think it's real important that we really do get what we want on here. And I guess, regarding my request is, I see projects like Powers and Old Ranch. That's already a PPRTA 2015 budgeted project. I think we're 600,000 short to finish the funding. We asked for that on RAMP. So to put projects on here, I'm going, well, are we wasting that because we know we've already got a way to fund it? Are we wasting, putting these requests on here if we already have a way to fund the project? So
I would be looking for clarification here, but kind of what I'm thinking is we've got a $554 million list. As we refine this, RAMP funds some, Tiger funds some, RTA funds some. I would think we could determine by March or whatever the magic day is. Okay, so we really do want to submit 350, 380. If we bump some of those others off, we could move something else into that place, would be my thinking. This is preliminary. It's early on. It's a starting point, and kind of based on that, I can support the motion. Commissioner Steen?
I wonder if it would be helpful just to, when we send this forward, regardless of what it looks like, with an explanation that it is our understanding, PPACG, that this is our full project list, but that other funding mechanisms will proceed as a note, almost a fiscal note to our submission, and that if they're looking for local, both elected officials and public support of this list, that greater flexibility should be allowed, and that'll create more buy-in at the local level. So I'm wondering if, I'd support also the motion forward the entire list with those two notes. One, that it is our expectation that other funding mechanisms will proceed, and that local MPOs, specifically PPACG, will be given greater flexibility in funding of the one-third transit dollars that under the current impact ballot proposal. That's clarifying.
Okay. Final comment here before we bring this to vote. Councilmember Gabler?
Would it be acceptable just to take maybe a couple-minute break before we vote? I know our traffic engineer would like to.
Absolutely. It is 10:45. We probably should have done that earlier. Let's do our best to keep it to 10 minutes. Be back here at 5 till 11.
I've got stuff I have to take care of. I really just kind of like to get this. So, can I ask, Jill, is it going to change a lot of what's up here based on that? Because
Kathleen has been talking to both Joel and myself during this meeting. And it is her request to reduce the amount for the powers extension to 100.
So if we can keep it to 5 minutes, because I've got to get up to Manitou. So
I think we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, 5-minute break. So don't go far.
By the way, sir,
As long as the council
you're getting a lot of good
I've had enough tea. Bring up a point that was pointed out to me, and I read in the TAC report. US 24 widening Falcon Highway to Ellicott Highway, $27 million price tag. If that doesn't make the list, the Central Front Range will lose about $54 million in funding. So, just to further confuse the issue. Norm, I don't know if you attend those meetings.
Well, I do, and we just had a little sidebar here on the US 24 Falcon Highway, the second from the bottom list there, that what I said from Craig Casper is that this is not a fully developed program, that doesn't have NEPA funding has not been done yet, and if that would delay the entire list, maybe you can clarify.
Yeah, I think the Impact 64 is supposed to be a 10-year program, 10-year funding program. In the world of environmental clearances, we've averaged 8 years just to do the planning, environmental clearance of any project. That particular project does not have the environmental clearance. I don't think they've even started it. County staff may have an update on that. But if it takes 6-7 years to clear it just to have the environmental clearance, then how are you going to get it done in the next couple of years past that? So it's been one of the standards of the ARA was ready to go. That one didn't seem ready to go to receive funding for, again, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, depending on how fast the environmental clearance takes.
I guess my question, would it not be good to take the first step on the NEPA, moving along, maybe not get it, or is that a hard and fast requirement completed within 10 years?
It's not a requirement. There's just no money identified to do that environmental clearance before you do the construction. And so I don't know if Central Front Range has money to do that environmental clearance. It's probably a couple $1 million.
It was talked to CDOT. It was estimated at $7 to $10 million for the NEPA document. So
And that hasn't
Surely you
started.
just.
no.
And the examples we have are I-25, Powers Boulevard, Highway 24 West, all had NEPA clearances that ran 6, 7 years and in the $7, $8 million range.
Victoria, would you like to?
I would like to. There's no requirement in this program that you have to finish the project. So, and there's no reason that we couldn't use the money that we allocate this to start that NEPA process. It obviously is the start of every single project process, whether it's underway or not. So even if we got through the NEPA program through this, wow, that's a much better step than what we had now. And if, as I've heard from the State Transportation Advisory Committee, they are considering making this a 15-year program. And so if I'm looking at a 15-year time frame, I can get through that NEPA project and get a good chunk built, at least that section that is south of Falcon, between 94 and Falcon, to get that to 4 lanes, even if we just get intersection improvements in the Central Front Range part. But it would just break my heart to lose a $56 million project in the Central Front Range because we don't have this piece on there. And I will lose that other piece if this piece is gone, because the two projects, although they split transportation boundaries, they are inextricably linked. So.
Norm?
Well, so I'm wondering if we drop the Powers extension from 204 to 100.
I guess I would like to see if that's what the city is thinking they want to do.
It is.
Oh, okay, and then add in those 3A projects, A5, 7, and 10, the 29 and 27 million,
You also want to drop the Power Central.
back into the project for I'm not sure if we can do the math this quickly, but we're dropping off 104, but adding in $56 million back in to the list.
Well, I think 5 was already on the list.
Oh, excuse me.
Well,
Yes.
it depends on what column you're looking at.
Yeah, important. Yes, so just the $36 million added in after dropping off the
When's
104.
Constitution one?
Is that an amendment?
Yes, I make that as a
Fortunately, we don't
motion
have the
to
motion
amend.
maker.
He's gone.
We don't need the motion maker here for a formal amendment, so. Do we have a second?
I'd just like to clarify what the amendment is, because and ask a question if I could. Are we
Absolutely.
establishing is this a prioritized list? So is this going top to bottom?
That was kind of the way I understood it, but
We only,
necessarily.
the board in the resolution has prioritized 1 and 2. Other than that, it's a bulleted list where there's no identified priority. Every time we try to get into those priorities, it gets pretty bloody. So it's like, this is our priority list, and as funds become available, they're color, then we prioritize projects.
Okay. Do I have a second to that amendment?
We just
What was the amendment again?
So the amendment was to include your reduction of the 204 down to 100, and secondly, to add in the Powers Research Parkway interchange for $20 million and the Colorado Avenue Business Route devolution of $9 million. Add that to the list after dropping yours from 204 to 100.
And
that was already in the original motion, though.
Well, okay, so
sorry. What you're talking about is the Colorado Business and the US 24 widening.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
You keep deferring.
I'm sorry. A little slow this morning. So yes, the US 24 widening Falcon Highway to Ellicott Highway, the $27 million. So taking off from 204 to 100, and again the 9 and the 27 projects near the bottom of the list.
Okay, and for a second, I guess I'm kind of looking to Keith. Keith, this affects your part of the world. If you don't think you want it,
Well, let me play devil's advocate here for a minute. Right now, Highway 24 at Ellicott is undergoing, they're putting in turn lanes there right now as we speak. I drove through that project this morning. So the state's already started on some of these things that are going to have to be accomplished for the widening. They're doing the widening there just because of the accident ratio. Finally got to the point there were enough fatalities at that intersection that they're putting in turn lanes in all directions. If you drop back the bridges in the last 2 years, the green bridge has been replaced. It's pretty much set up where it can, if they do the widening, it's already in place. All of the bridges that they did between Falcon proper and Judge Orr are wide enough to accommodate lanes. So I would say if we research it, there's probably been some of this environmental impact stuff done in kind of a piecemeal basis. There may be some that remains to need to be done, but that there's probably some of it that's already been done. And Elbert and 24 has been widened and had turn lanes in all directions put in. So the state itself has been moving towards that widening project. Maybe we need to research a little bit more and see, how far along they are on that project.
Okay, Mayor Snyder? Oh, I thought I saw your hand earlier. Well, I'm going to second it for purposes of a vote, and then we'll decide where it's going to go. I believe what Keith's talking about are items that the CDOT can do without any NEPA project or process. They can make safety improvements and those types of things without going through that whole environmental clearance. So I think that's what's been happening, where the crash ratio has gotten higher than what they can live with. So further discussion before we vote on the amendment.
Just to clarify, I would include those two comments. One is that we expect funding to continue on those other two options, on other funding options, and that we request that the ballot language include greater flexibility at the PPACG level for those otherwise designated transit dollars. Is that just to be clear?
If that's part of your amendment,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. Councilmember Gabler?
The other thing that was mentioned to us was along Powers, the item that is checked is the Powers Central Freeway, Woodman to Carefree, and our traffic engineer doesn't think that's worthwhile until the item that's on the bottom of the list, the Powers Central Freeway intersection, is complete. So I think we want to swap those two out. They're exactly the same price.
So you would prefer
Is that correct?
to have the bottom one checked and not
And not the North Carefree to Woodman. It's a higher priority, the lower one.
CAC and TAC and various did not agree with that. I guess I'd like to know why. But Councilmember Pico?
Tax list.
Yeah, I'm still not understanding that rationale, and I kind of like to back off on that one, because I don't get it.
Maybe Kathleen could come in.
Because we're going from north to south all the way down there, and then we're going to jump from south to north and leave the middle not done, and I'm not quite following that logic.
And
that is
Councilmember Pico, I tend to agree with you, because I was thinking, no, that's not the part I drive. But that makes sense. But that makes sense, based on your.
But it's the part that I drive, and I'm just kind of not following that. I'm not following
and
the
that's
logic.
true. And to be truthful, I think that there probably need to be done in very close proximity. But if we have if our number one capacity issue at the moment on Powers Boulevard is Constitution and Powers. Number two would be South Carefree and Powers. And then number three would be North Carefree and Powers. And so I guess I'm afraid that if we build an interchange, excuse me, at, say, Dublin, that does not have the capacity issues, that our citizens are going to say, why am I putting up with level of service at Constitution? And Dublin has an interchange. You're right, whenever we move from an arterial street cross-section to a freeway section, we end up with that awkwardness of there's signals here, there's interchanges here, and we're going to have to deal with that. I'm not sure that our ultimate answer will be all interchanges on Powers. I just think that if we're only going to fund one portion of it, it probably would be best to put the money toward the central, or you might want to say $100 million for various interchanges on Powers and say from Woodman to Constitution, and then we can sort of pick and choose as we go.
I like that idea, and I certainly concur that from a congested, it goes exactly as you say, as I do that every
We have
morning.
to light 4 times at
Yeah.
Constitution sometimes, yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
I have a
let-
problem
no
with that
fighting,
here.
too.
We're swapping from my district to your district. So.
Okay, here's how we're going to handle that.
We are in an awkward.
We're going to vote on the amendment the way it stands, and I don't want to cloud that issue with a separate issue on Powers. And then we'll come back, and if someone wants to make an amendment on the Powers side, then that's how we'll handle that. So the amendment on the floor drops the Powers extension to $100 million, includes, adds the two towards the bottom there, not the bottom, both, Colorado Avenue and US 24 widening, with a couple of comments that Norma's made. With that, I will call the roll. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Now, before we vote on the main motion, does anybody wish to change wording on the Powers?
Oh, because we already amended it, right?
Right.
Okay.
So
I would like to amend because what's passed right now is the amendment that leaves the Woodman's North carefree, the 106. I would like to amend that to $100 million for the Powers corridor from Woodman to Constitution.
100 or 106?
106. I guess
Okay.
we'll leave the amounts the same.
Yeah.
Councilmember Pico?
Why don't you extend a little bit further north to include research in it? Because I'm not sure the research has that same level of traffic. does it?
Research is the same.
Research
It's
is
a separate,
already
it's a
been-
separate issue, so why don't we roll it into the same conglomeration, north to south? Because that's just the next one up.
So 100,
But
So,
but research has already been included.
It's a separate
It's
project.
a separate line on them up here.
Right.
Yes, for another
So are
20.
you saying we should just do 126 for the section from research down to Constitution?
Yeah.
I think that would be an acceptable. That way, we take out the Powers Research interchange and we combine that with Powers corridor from research to Constitution for 126.
And we probably want to call that intersection improvements. So we don't lock ourselves into
Sure.
interchanges.
I think that would be acceptable.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second?
Further discussion? So we're voting on an amendment now. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. So now we have a main motion. Do we need further explanation? It basically includes, all of the items plus with the change of that last amendment to allow some flexibility on that Powers corridor for $126 million. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I think that's a great starting point. I think we'll refine it as time goes on. Moving into information items, item A, Neil Ralston is here with the Colorado Springs Airport Master Plan update.
I appreciate that, but not going back to the forest.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Neil Ralston, Interim Assistant Director for Planning and Development at the Colorado Springs Airport. So I appreciate your time this morning. I'm very pleased to announce that we're nearing the end of our airport master planning process. It started back in 2009. The intent of today's presentation is to provide you with a quick overview of the master plan's key findings and the process that we're taking to close out the project. I'm going to start with a quick overview about what is an airport master plan through the FAA's eyes. Next, we'll review the key findings of the plan and walk through the highlights of our recommended development plan for the airfield. And finally, we'll talk about our stakeholder engagement efforts and the final steps we'll be taking to complete the project. So what is an FAA master plan? Using a process that is prescribed to us by the Federal Aviation Administration, master plan provides a framework for development of an airport's facilities and infrastructure over a 20 to 25-year period. From a funding perspective, this process is very important to us because future facility and infrastructure development must be depicted on an FAA-approved airport layout plan and justified in a master plan before it's eligible for federal airport improvement program funding through the FAA. On the left side, to my left, there's an example of what the airport layout plan looks like. That's a technical document that is a product of the master planning process, and that actually does get approved by the FAA as an enabling step for projects to become eligible for federal funding. There's other enabling steps as well, but that's the first one. Our existing airport master plan was completed in the late 1990s. It served us well. It set the stage for the development of the airport business park and articulating the need for improvements, FAA money to come to the airport for rehabilitating airport airfield pavements. But a fresh look at the entire plan was needed. So we initiated this process back in October of 2009. The first step in the master planning process is to develop a facility inventory. What are the existing, what do we have for existing facilities? And then developing aviation demand forecasts. And that's for passengers, cargo, general aviation, military, passengers, operations. What kind of demand do we expect to be generated from an aviation perspective over the next 25 years? We completed our original forecast in October of 2010 at the FAA's request. We did go ahead and update that forecast here in June of 2013. Bottom line, our forecast update follows some of the downward trends we've had at the airport over the last couple of years, particularly from a passenger employment perspective. But the good news is the change in the forecast numbers really doesn't affect any of the master plan's findings, which are primarily related to safety and efficiency factors and not capacity needs. After the forecast, we develop facility requirements. What types of facilities do we need to accommodate future growth? And then we move into the alternatives analysis. For those facilities that need to be expanded or improved, what are the different ways of doing that? That rolls into a recommended development plan, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. We've prepared some implementation elements, and we're getting ready to submit this plan to the FAA here next week, actually, for their final approval. You notice a big gap between our facility requirements analysis and our alternatives analysis from January 2011 to August 2012. We had an opportunity to design and construct a new checked baggage inspection system at the airport. And yours truly had the pleasure of being able to manage that project. So I know more about baggage systems than anybody possibly want to know. But we had to pause the master plan while resources were diverted to the baggage project and taking advantage of TSA funding to be able to do that. So some key analysis, key findings from the master plan, particularly the facility requirements analysis. Really, the airport's in an excellent position to accommodate future demand, even at the higher original forecast levels through the planning period. To be honest, when this process started, we expected this to expected the findings to show that we needed to improve the terminal building somewhat and make enhancements there. But we really found that the terminal building is well designed and can accommodate a lot more capacity than we're pumping through it now and expected in the future. Of course, if you were here during the Western Pacific days, know that this terminal building accommodated a large volume of traffic. We found some deficiencies in the security screen checkpoint and in checked baggage, but those deficiencies have been addressed through projects. We were able to actually complete the security checkpoint expansion and reconfiguration project before the plan was done that says we needed to do it. So it's kind of a unique position to be in. But anybody who's been out to the airport recently, if you've seen the checkpoint, you'll know it's a vast improvement over what we had when we started this back in 2009. What the plan did suggest, however, is our focus should be on making some safety-related improvements to the airfield, along with some options to mitigate some operational constraints we have, namely on our west runway. When aircraft are departing to the north, they take some weight restrictions due to some due to some obstacles and the uphill slope of the runway. And we thought there was some ways we could try to improve the operational capability of our west runway in particular. On the general aviation side, we have a lot of space on the west side of the airport. We did identify the need for some additional corporate hangar space throughout the project. So on the airfield alternatives, which is where we really focused our efforts in the master plan, what were we trying to do? We set some objectives here, reducing the risk of wrong runway departures. Back in 2006, there was a accident in Lexington, Kentucky, where a regional jet was given clearance to take off on their air carrier runway. Instead turned onto the shorter general aviation runway, didn't make it off the end and killed everybody on the plane, but I believe one person survived. So after that accident, the FAA came out with a list of contributing factors and looked at what types of airport infrastructure could contribute to another wrong runway departure type of accident. And we actually made the list of having several contributing factors in our airfield that could contribute to that type of accident in the future. So we wanted to see if we could clean that up. Also, we wanted to address, to the extent practical, hotspots on our airfield. Hotspots are locations that are identified by the FAA through user input, where there's a history of potential risk of collision or a runway incursion. Really, areas where there could be enhanced pilot confusion because of the way pavements come together and are designed. So we have a couple of those on the airfield, and we wanted to see if we could address those as well. Again, the operational capability of our west runway. How could we allow aircraft to take off at a higher weight going north from the west runway? And we wanted to maintain the primary function of runway 1331, which is our crosswind runway, the one right in front of Peterson Air Force Base. That runway gets used a lot for convenience. It also gets used gets used during high crosswind conditions, particularly when winds are howling out of the northwest. And we wanted to be able to continue to have that runway serve aircraft landing during high crosswind conditions, particularly to the northwest. So do you all know what the runway numbers mean? Does that make sense to everyone? Yes.
No, go ahead.
I absolutely do, yeah. But one curious thing here. I'm not quite following it's the headings.
The magnetic heading.
I knew that because Neil explained that to me when I was on the advisory committee, but I'm not sure the non-military types here know that. So.
No, we've already answered it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the headings of the runway. Yeah, as it precesses around. On the reducing the risk of wrong runway departures, besides the dumbness of whoever lines up in the wrong runway, what improvements are you going to do that's going to reduce that? I'm not following
I'll show you
that
in just a sec. We're getting
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's particularly the northwest quadrant of the Colorado Springs Airport. The factors that the FAA identified as possibly contributing to wrong runway departures is we have multiple taxiways, in this case here Bravo 1 and Alpha 1, that serve or give access to two different runway ends. That was one of the contributing factors at Lexington. And also we have two runway ends in close proximity to
Looks like
one
a
another.
candidate for a roundabout.
Yeah. Please, let's not go there. We've talked enough about roads. Let's talk about airplanes.
So if he comes off of taxiway B1 and he's given a 1-3 departure, you're telling me that the guy is dumb enough to line up on a 1-7 heading?
Happened to Lexington. Not saying it's right or wrong, or I'm a pilot as well. Shouldn't happen, but it did. So FAA is looking at,
So what
we're
are you?
constantly adjusting. FAA is constantly adjusting their airfield design best practices to eliminate these sorts of intersections.
So how would you change it?
I'll show you in just a second.
Okay.
He told you, Andy, be patient.
So, recommended development program. After a very thorough and comprehensive, and I'll say collaborative as well, alternatives evaluations process, we've arrived at a recommended development plan that will be shown in this airport master plan. The key accomplishments of what we're showing here are decoupling the intersection of the west runway, which is runway 17 right, 35 left, and runway 1331, physically decoupling the pavement so they don't intersect anymore. And that's enhancing safety and reducing the potential for pilot confusion. And I have a blow-up here. We'll get into it here in just a second. And improving the operational capability of the west runway at the same time. I'll show you some details there. And then improving several taxiway intersections and geometry in order to meet FAA's current design best practices. So, how do we do that? This is the northwest quadrant of the airfield. This is a blow-up of this area right here. So what we're proposing to do is literally pick up the west runway and move it to the south. Okay? That involves shortening roughly 1,800 feet on the north end of runway 17 right, and a more minor shortening of runway 13, shortening, didn't want to do that. Didn't want to do that either. There we go. Shortening it by about 400 feet. What you see here in red is existing pavement that would be removed. Blue is pavement that would be added. So we'd also be displacing the threshold of runway 13 to the intersection of taxiway Charlie, so there's a standard end of approach end runway crossing. Also, some improvements to taxiways. Of course, the existing taxiway system would not necessarily serve this new runway, and would not serve it well. The plan is to construct standard entry and bypass connectors at each end on both the taxiway Charlie and the Alpha side. That's both the east and west sides of the shifted runway, and then some additional taxiway adjustments as well. Moving down to the south end, again, I said we would shift the runway. We would pick up 1,800 feet off the north end. We'd put it back on the south end, and then we'd actually increase that runway by another 700 feet. So it's a 2,500-foot extension on the south end of the runway. That's as far as we can go based on FAA's criteria of runway protection zones. We can't have our runway protection zone, which is a trapezoid shape off the end of the runway, extend onto Milton E. Proby Parkway. Can't have, from a planning perspective, you can't show a public roadway in your runway protection zone. So it's as far as we can take the runway. It makes sense. So we shift the whole runway south. We decouple the intersection at the north, and we actually get a bit longer runway for aircraft departing to the north. Now, we do have a displaced landing threshold here as well. The landing threshold is where aircraft land. In this case, aircraft would not be able to land at the end of the runway extension. They'd be able to land approximately 700 feet to the north of that. And again, that's due to runway protection zone criteria as far as why that would be. So we're also showing...
Let's get a pilot's comment here. Go ahead, Joel.
I got a quick question with this shift. How many feet south? 2,500?
2,500.
So we're talking 4-mile shift here, right? I'm sorry, half a mile shift. Sorry, Pat. We have an issue already with airspace in Fort Carson, like when we're doing instrument approaches to the north. Does this exacerbate that problem at all? I know there's been issues in the past when they've got UAVs flying their protected zone and our instrument approach zone going north have been in conflict, and so there's sort of an MOU between the two, and I just wondered if...
Yeah, Joel, to be honest, the 1999 master plan shows the landing threshold right here as well. It's been airspaced then, it's been airspaced now, and there's been no...
I mean, I'm just wondering if they're...
It has not been brought up as a concern or an issue with potential UAV conflicts or general airspace conflicts with Butts Field down at Fort Carson.
Because right now there is actually, I can't remember what the weather criteria is, but at some point there has to be some sort of understanding between Springs Approach and Fort Carson. They're not allowed to start doing instrument approaches unless Carson gets everything set down.
And that would continue. That same procedure would continue underneath this scenario. We're moving. We'd still have the instrument landing system, the precision approach on runway 35 left. It would just shift 1,800 feet to the south.
Any discussion of higher category ILS?
Cat 2 on 35 right.
So is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Category 2, it's a higher. It would allow aircraft to land in lower visibility conditions, but that would go on the east runway is where it's shown. It's a longer runway, and we did a lot of analysis. Of where would an improved instrument approach go on 35 right 1.
What's category 1?
We have category 1 approaches on 17 left and 35 left. We have category 1 on 35 right as well, but there's no approach lights. So it's a 3/4 mile visibility or minimums as opposed to half mile.
So The lighting would have to be put in on.
3-5 right, we need lighting one way or the other, and the plan shows an ALSIF 2, an enhanced approach light system, a bigger approach light system compared to what we have today on the runways with instrument approaches, which would get us the Category 2 minimums. That's one of several things we need to do to get Cat 2.
But right now, that lighting system's only on the west runway.
We have approach lights on 17 left and 3-5 left.
What's the ALSIF?
We don't have an ALSIF 2 today.
Well, guys, why don't I let you take that offline?
Yes, absolutely. We are. I'll suffice it to say we are planning for enhanced instrumentation on the east runway as well to improve all-weather landing capability. Fair enough?
That
Okay.
works.
There we go. Also, just wanted to show here where, in addition to the runway shift, which is the big element of this master plan, is showing this. We're also showing room for future expansion of facilities. We do have room on the west side of the airfield for future general aviation and maintenance type facilities. We're blocking out areas for those types of development to occur so that we can reserve space as we plan for things going forward. Let's see here. On the east runway, again, it's a newer runway. The runway itself is in great shape from a geometric perspective, no changes there. What we're showing here are some changes to the taxiway system to meet best newer and better FAA airfield design practices. So not a whole lot here of interest probably to the group. Of course, there's no plans complete without having an idea how much it would cost and how it's likely to be paid for. So we do have a funding analysis in the master plan as well. For context, our current 5-year capital improvement program really continues to focus on pavement rehabilitation. We have a lot of, I guess I got to stop hitting the table. We have a lot of pavement on the airfield, and a lot of it needs rehabilitation. So we're going to continue in the next, really, I have 5 years here, really it's the next 7 to 8 years on pavement rehabilitations. We think we got about $70 million worth of pavement rehab to do over the next several years. That being said, the master plan has broken up this recommended development plan into 3 phases for cost estimating. Phase 1 is those west airfield improvements we talked about, literally shifting the runway to the south, shortening 1331 by a small amount to get that decoupling in. And that's a $58 million project. It's a big project. There's a lot of earthwork on the south end of the west runway. However, to put that in context, we have since 2006, we've received about $90 million worth of grant monies from the FAA to rehabilitate the east runway and its associated taxiway complex. So this is a big number, absolutely, but it's within the range of feasibility to accomplish. There's the approach lights for runway 35 right and paving some vehicle service roads. That's part of our Phase 1 program. Phase 2 is some additional taxiway connectors on that west runway system. Phase 3 is east airfield improvements. Phase 4 would be a moving taxiway alpha, actually moving it an additional 100 feet from the west runway to get some better operational efficiencies with that runway. That's a much lower priority than these other items, hence moving into Phase 4. So clearly this requires extensive coordination with the FAA and our partners at the State Division of Aeronautics. And we've started that process already. We've had a lot of collaboration with the FAA on this program. They're actually very supportive of it. And we think we're going to have great support from them in getting this funded. Although I want to be very clear, this doesn't happen next year. There's several other enabling projects that need to occur. We talked about NEPA with roads. We need to do NEPA with airfields as well. So there's environmental clearances that need to take place in design. We do think there's an opportunity perhaps to initiate some of those enabling projects in the 2018 to 2020 timeframe, which would allow for construction in the early 2020s of this type of project. So of that west airfield improvement project. So and I need to finish this slide, and I need to, if you take anything else away from this, please remember this, that future development of the airport is and will continue to be self-funded by users of the airport and the national aviation system. There's no local property taxes. There's no local sales taxes that are used to fund airport capital improvements. So very, very important. This is all funded through FAA state grants. We've been very successful in getting those grants grants, and we hope to continue to be successful getting them going forward. Stakeholder engagement. Through our guiding principles, we set out to foster consensus among key stakeholders, including the airport users, FAA, the Airport Advisory Commission, and airport management. And we wanted to employ a focused program to inform the public of future plans. Attempts to do this, we've done several things. First off, we've been giving briefings to our full Airport Advisory Commission. We've done 5 standalone presentations on the master plan since this process started, and there's been monthly project updates. At the beginning, we also created I'll call it a subcommittee of the Airport Advisory Commission to serve as an advisory group. Over the course of the project, we briefed them 22 separate times to solicit their input and advice on this, and really appreciate their efforts and their time in that program. And then we've done individual stakeholder briefings, including to your transportation citizen advisory committees. Really been pretty active over the last couple months in trying to get the word out on the master plan. We also had a public open house on August 1st from 4 to 7 p.m. at the airport. We had 28 people sign our list. Got one positive comment that someone was glad that we're making the airport more efficient and safer. So that's a good thing. And the materials from that public meeting are available on the airport's website should anyone be interested in reviewing them. From a local approval process, we have submitted the master plan to City Land Use Review, City Colorado Springs Land Use Review. They've determined this is a minor amendment to the existing airport master plan, and will be undergoing an administrative review. We submitted that last week and anticipate completion of that in late September. Finally, with our partners at the FAA, we've collaborated with them well throughout the process. They've already looked at a draft of all of this and put it through their technical airspace review process. We didn't get any negative comments through that. So we will be submitting the airport layout plan, drawing set, and the technical report next week to FAA for their final approval. Schedule, I won't take time with this other than to say we're getting ready to be done and intend to have this project complete by the end of the FAA's federal fiscal year at the end of September. That's all I have. Any questions?
Questions for Neil?
Not a question. I just want to commend Neil on this is a long, arduous, difficult, and really important process for airports. I appreciate your efforts. And the only question that I have is about the funding for. Is there any sense of what portion would be funded from FAA grants versus CIP sort of capital improvement?
Well, thank you for your comments. First of all, I know from your time on the commission you were on when we started this, and appreciate all the support along the way. And it has been a long, a long process. Really pleased with the results. I think we've accomplished a good plan, good solid plan that'll move the airport forward. On the funding side, it's really too early to say what percent is going to be where. I will say that. Again, we have some real solid support from FAA. Linda Bruce from the FAA's office up in Denver actually came down to the advisory commission meeting when we were presenting this and had some really positive things to say about the plan. Anything to do with runway safety gets a very high priority in the FAA system, and this is a runway safety project. We're decoupling runway ends. We're addressing wrong runway departures, hot spots, clearing up runway safety areas. I expect that this project should compete pretty well for discretionary money. That being said, it depends on all the other projects in the region that are competing for the same money. So I think we are setting ourselves up for a high level of funding, but I have to say it depends on what else will be going on at the same time. But we're starting to have those discussions here 10 years in advance of the project with FAA, and where could this fit in your funding program based on what you know now.
And then I didn't see, when was that moving south? What's the desired time that would begin to happen?
Early 2020s. It's not going to happen anytime. So we have to go through an environmental assessment, that whole process, and we're thinking that could start in the 2018 timeframe based on some gaps in the FAA's funding windows. Anything else?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Neil.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to continue with our football theme here, and we're going to punt the Area Agency on Aging Ombudsman Program update to next month, which brings us to our CDOT ramp projects application update. Craig, I suspect that'll be short.
Very short. CDOT at the stack meeting, talked a little bit about it. They have completed the evaluation and the ranking. They're not going to release those until they actually release the recommended list. They didn't want to confuse anything if the rankings and evaluations changed to match the recommendations. They said they're just this one unified package instead of taking the chance that things didn't blend. So,
Okay. Thank you. Stack report. Stack's already happened, so what did you do?
We got some updates. Lisa, Wayne couldn't attend. He had this being sued by the Libertarians issue to deal with. Lisa was our representative. Not a lot. Got some updates on the 2015 budget. It's going to look a lot like the 2014 budget. Moving in the direction of having a statewide pot of funds and then the commission will go through a mini ARA type process where regions will apply for projects and the commission will evaluate and choose those. And that's how the bulk of CDOT's budget is going to be taken care of.
Thank you. Member entity announcements. Anything for the good of the body here? We have a meeting schedule. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Only have to convene. You don't have to.